I just turned mine off. Oh, look at this. Now we're gonna have 5 people, or is he just?
Who?
Yeah, this is on air right there.
Okay, now we're in progress. Good evening. First of all, I would like to apologize for being late to this hearing. I'd like to open the hearing of the Mashpee Conservation Commission for Thursday, January 23rd. We have a full list of items to discuss and hopefully approve this evening. Would you like to cover some of these items?
I think we should open the hearings.
I think so.
Yeah,
I think
please.
it's a good idea.
Please and thanks.
Let's put all of those away, and let's see whether we have not upset the Humphreys so that they have left the meeting. We'd like to call William T. and Kathleen M. Humphrey at 29 Secaucet Point Road for proposed demolition, reconstruction of a single-family dwelling with attached garage, landscaping, hardscaping, modifications, and mitigation planting. This is continued from December 12th. January 9th, 2020, we asked for revised plans on mitigation areas, setbacks at the coastal bank, removal of a new lawn, and a 20% of the lot left in naturally vegetated state. Someone, good evening, Michael.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. For the record, my name is Michael Borselli, and I represent the applicant, William Humphrey. Yes, we had our initial public hearing several weeks ago, and there were some issues and concerns raised by your staff and the commission. So we continued the hearing. We actually had a meeting with Drew at his office to go through his concerns. We reviewed the regulations. We made some edits to the plan to address the concerns, and I submitted a letter to you on January 10th that summarizes the revisions. I'll run through that sort of in a brief outline fashion. As you had stated, Mr. Chairman, we had proposed to remove a small section of patio and replace it with lawn. There's an existing patio out on the property now, so instead of removing that small section of patio and replacing it with lawn, we're now removing it and replacing it with bark mulch. There was a comment that the ACEC boundary had not been on the plan. It had been on the plan, but it just was overlooked. So I pointed that out to Drew. We did not show a 50-foot or 100-foot setback from the top of the coastal bank on the original plan. The revised plan shows the 50 and 100-foot setbacks. We had originally shown the mitigation planting in a general fashion and had suggested that we'd work with staff on the details. I believe this board would rather have the specifics up front. So we added to the plan the spacing, type of plants, and the number of plants. So all that information is now depicted on the plan. On the north side of the house, we had proposed to remove some invasives from the edge of the house to the common boundary with the neighbor. Because of the issues or concerns about removing all of that vegetation, we revised it to only remove a small strip right adjacent to the house, 8 feet in width, just to gain access around the side of the house for the construction. Keep in mind there is already a house there that we're replacing, and the vegetation has grown virtually up against that house. And we think it's reasonable to provide a 8-foot corridor just for the sake of being able to excavate and stage, put staging up next to it, and then to be able to, in the future, maintain the side of the house. So we're hopeful that that's acceptable. The balance of the vegetation on that side will remain. We denoted on the revised plans all of the existing vegetated areas, both on the existing conditions plan and on the proposed plan. The existing condition plan, of course, shows a little bit more total area of vegetation because the proposed plan is removing a small portion of existing vegetation in the area of the proposed detached garage. And it is in a flood zone, and this town is one of the only towns I work in that actually has some regulations about land subject to coastal storm flowage. But if you work your way through your regulation, which I did with Drew, and look at the plan, we demonstrated that although we're removing a small portion, we're still leaving intact 23% of the natural vegetation. You require a minimum of 20. And it's also, the regulation is really geared more towards land subject to coastal storm flowage that is adjacent to other wetland resources that may be in a more pristine condition. This area where we're altering the natural vegetation is like a landlocked section of vegetation between the house and the road. The flood zone creeps up into that just because the elevation of the landform is lower than the base flood elevation. So it's not like seaward facing flood zone on a more pristine waterfront that may have a salt marsh or another wetland resource. So I think combining the fact that we're not removing more, we're leaving in place in excess of 20%, and that area is landlocked to other wetland resources, that it meets your regulations. And finally, I think it was Chairman Sweet who had asked at the original hearing for us to comment why the garage wasn't connected to the house. And I stated in the letter I submitted that, and I think when that was asked, it was at a time when it wasn't clear that we were meeting the 20% regulation. But in any event, we are meeting the 20% minimum, but I stated in the letter that the reason that the house, the garage isn't connected to the house is because the way that the proposed house is laid out, the pieces of, the frontage of the house on the street is all bedroom. So it doesn't lend itself to a connection for the garage through like a typical mudroom unless you expanded the house even more. So we're hopeful that that satisfies you or justifies not connecting it, combined with the fact that we're leaving 23% in a natural state on the property. So that sums it up, and I'm happy to answer questions.
Okay. Do you have anything to comment?
Sure. Yes, so Mike is accurate in that everything that we had requested to change on the plan was changed. Just wanted to reiterate that once that area is cleared next to on the north side of the house for construction access, that it can't be a new lawn per Regulation 31. There's no new lawn within 50 feet of a resource area, but that is understood. So bark mulch, some other type of ground cover would be appropriate in the area, which has also been changed, as he had said, by the part of patio, portion of patio that was going to be removed once it's reconstructed, that will also not be new lawn. And as he had stated too, the Regulation 25 was met as far as landlocked lots, 10 to 20,000 square feet. He does have the 20% existing natural vegetation to occur, and the mitigation species that were chosen were bayberry and beach plum, which should hopefully thrive in that area. It will be under some canopy, as there is some tree. Obviously, there's some existing trees in that area too. But there's also quite a lot of open space, so that should really be an improvement, a really good improvement to the area as far as wildlife value goes. And the driveway is going to be pervious. We had just discussed that due to the fact it's in the flood zone as well, and being a fairly flat lot, it'll be good to minimize any runoff in this area.
If I could interrupt,
Sure.
I would hope that you would make that a condition to make sure that that is clear.
The driveway is pervious?
Yeah.
All right.
Yes, it will be a condition in that it's the flood zone, so we'll make doubly sure of that.
That's not on the plan then, huh?
It just says proposed driveway.
Yeah, it doesn't
Yeah,
say
it's called
pervious
out.
or impervious, but per discussion, and that will be conditioned.
The current driveway is gravel too.
Yes,
So-
yes. So I don't have any further comments,
Okay.
and I recommend a closed session.
Do we have any questions from the commission? No? Do we
I
have
move-
any, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Do we have any questions from the audience? Hearing none, I call for a motion.
I move that we close an issue with the condition that the driveway will be a pervious surface.
Okay,
I second the motion.
all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, I'll take all those back and
Coming back.
switch it out.
You don't have an assistant to do that.
I don't know, I just, used to doing it myself, but Katrina, I'm
it
sure, is
through.
more than capable of doing it. Just, I was just in a tizzy, so I was, yeah. Figured it'd be more fun. I also did it.
We're going to call the 6:03 hearing of Stratford Ponds condominium owners, 83 Stratford Ponds Road, for proposed removal of gray willow invasives and a replacement of native vegetation.
Good evening. I'm John Figmick from Maffey Landscape, representing Stratford Ponds condominium.
Could you tell us a little bit about the project? There's some
Sure.
nice pictures and demonstrations of what you want to do in the
Well-
paperwork, but tell us about it.
Sure. I actually originally met Caitlin out there a couple of months back, and for the record, probably the rainiest 15 minutes of the entire day when we were both there looking at it. But the project originally started out with the intention of requesting some vista pruning of some of the plant material near the bridge on that road. And as Caitlin and I looked at the plants along that bridge, it quickly became clear that the vast majority of the planting that the applicant wanted to vista prune was actually gray willow, which should be removed. So we have put forth the application, and I met with Drew to go over it ahead of time to remove that willow, and the applicant will gladly plant matching native vegetation in those areas in an effort to outcompete any of the gray willow that may want to come back, and of course, to provide appropriate cover to those opened areas.
We've got pretty
So
big.
do we know what kind of plantings is going to be put in?
The plantings in the, or the vegetation that's in that immediate area mostly consists of blueberry and some clethra and some ilex. So we would replant with matching material.
Cool. That's good.
And just wanted to just
that-
reiterate, I think you had said at our on-sites that no herbicide will be used for
Correct.
it. And it'll, if any suckers or any other growth occurs, that'll just be removed on-site.
Correct.
As needed.
We'll flush cut the plant material even a little below if we can, in an effort to destroy, if you will, as much of the stump growth, the root mass as possible. But there will, over time, until the replanted material gets a chance to cover it over, there'll have to be some clipping, I'm sure. That's part of the problem with those gray willows, is that they like to sucker up from whatever root material is left.
Is this the removal area primarily right immediately along the roadway?
Yes.
Or is it on the extended side?
As you drive in, it's on the left-hand side,
Yep.
within the bridge abutments.
Okay,
Yep. So it's a very narrow area.
so there's no need to address any of the other shorelines on that little pond?
No, sir.
There's no encroachment from that side?
Nope.
Cool.
Nope, not at all.
Okay,
And it's, generally speaking, it's a moderately to heavily wooded bank area associated with the pond there. So you're not really losing much habitat or different stratification of habitat. There's plenty of larger trees in the immediate area so it shouldn't be too detrimental in that sense. And, of course, no existing native vegetations to be disturbed as a result of the project, and if and when that does occur, of course, to be replanted. It is an RDA, so it, as we know, that's not conditioned, but
Right.
If any deviation from the plan in place occurs, just, we'll follow up with us, and we can go from there in case it's extra difficult for some reason. And gray willow, I know, can be quite difficult, but again, removal of an invasive species is something that we do want to see, like to see, and the proliferation of native materials. So overall, I think it's a good project, beneficial.
absolutely. Okay, any questions from the commissioners? Nope, nothing? Any
Right.
questions from the audience?
Oh, just one more thing real quick, sorry. If an herbicide is to be used, it has to be a state license applicator, if and when that does occur down the road, even though it's not part of this plan today.
Sure,
Just
that's not
wanted
a
to-
problem.
Just wanted to make sure that was known. Thank you.
Okay, hearing nothing, I'll entertain a motion.
I move for a negative determination.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, the motion carries. We have an RDA. Move on to the 606 Joseph F. and Lisa N. Bowenberger, Aquay Bay, proposed aquaculture project within the water of Aquay Bay, approximately 1.1 acres in size. This is
So-
an NOI.
So per our policy, DEP policy and Regulation 3, we do not open hearings that have not received a DEP number, and that is the case for this particular project. Applicant is aware, and as soon as the number is issued, of course, it can be heard. So we're anticipating that'll hopefully happen by the next meeting, but for now, a continuance request will need to occur for 609 on February 13th.
Did the applicant request a continuance?
It's per our policy, so they didn't have to formally request it, but they are aware of it, and because the DEP number wasn't issued, and it's our policy not to open the hearing, we can proceed with the continuance without them being present.
Okay, so if that's the case, if anybody's waiting to hear that hearing, then it's going to be put off until February 13th at 6:09 PM. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that's moved.
Okay, great, thank you.
And then we have a 6:09 hearing from Eric P. Rothenberg and Pamela Eli at 18 Spoondrift Circle. Proposed installation of 2 additional piles and a float to an existing pier, ramp, and float structure. This is an NOI. Is this in the same situation?
It is the same situation. Michael is here, of course, because he was here for other hearings as well, so I can, if you'd
Yeah.
like to make the request,
Sure.
that's fine, but
Thank
it's
you. Yeah,
not
we
necessary.
understand the DEP file number hasn't been issued, so we request a continuance to February 13th.
And that would be at 6:12.
So moved.
Second, anybody?
Yeah, second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Very good.
Aye.
Okay, so it's continued.
Excellent.
Okay, moving to the 6:12 hearing of NJCJ LLC, 21 Metacomic Road, proposed amendment of the Orders of Condition 43-2964 to install an additional pile and reconfigure a previously approved piles to allow for an addition of a boat
Thank you very
lift. This is a administrative order of conditions amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the commission. For the record, my name is Michael Borselli from Falmouth Engineering. I represent the applicant, Jim Whitney. Mr. Whitney's here tonight. Mr. Whitney owns the property in question. You've seen me here before for other applications on the property. Most notably is an application that proposed a new fixed pier, ramp, and float. An order of conditions was granted for the fixed pier, ramp, and float. It was granted after several hearings to work with conservation staff and natural resources folks in the town. I think there were 3 actual hearings. We made modifications in response to those concerns. And the net result was an order of conditions that allowed for a pile-supported fixed pier with a ramp and a float. The float that was approved measured 6 foot by 24 foot, and it was retrofitted subsequent to the original approval with some float stops to prevent the seaward end from any potential bottoming out at a very low tide, a moon low tide. So tonight we're here for a very simple amendment request. Nothing's changing with the pier, nothing's changing with the ramp, nothing's changing with the float as far as its configuration. Nothing's changing about how you would tie a boat to the float, reorienting the float, making it longer, putting it in a different position, or even realigning it in any way. We're here tonight to, the only activity that is under your review is the installation of one additional timber piling, and then to reconfigure the previously approved pilings from their original approved location to a location that creates a box or a square with 4 pilings, so that the additional piling is added to the 3, and they're configured in a way that a boat hoisting mechanism can be retrofitted to the pilings. Mr. Whitney has experience with the hoist. He has one at another property. So the purpose of the hoist is to allow for a boat to berth on the north side of the float, in the same place it would berth with or without the lift. But instead of remaining in the water, the cabling that hoists the cradle would allow the boat to be lifted out of the water to prevent the bottom fouling, and also to put it in a more secure position in the event Mr. Whitney's not on the property for longer periods of time. So the activity, the sole activity, is the installation of one additional 12-inch piling. The cross-sectional area of that piling is 0.78 square feet, so it's less than 1 square foot of penetration. It is penetrating the bottom. It is permanently eliminating 0.78 square feet of bottom, but it's doing that in a water body that's hundreds of thousands of square feet in area. So, in our opinion, that is de minimis. So, when we filed the application, of course, we filed, copies were submitted to the Shellfish Constable and the Harbor Master, and we received comments back from both bodies. And then we subsequently responded to the comments made by the Shellfish Constable. And a letter was provided to all, I had emailed and provided to all of you, and I'm hopeful that you were able to read it. I'm going to paraphrase it. And I'm going to basically point out that the concerns of the Shellfish Constable that were raised were based on just individual opinion. They weren't based on any specific regulation, bylaw, or prohibition that I'm aware of, either at the DEP level or the local Mashpee wetlands regulation level. In fact, there's actually regulations that direct you how to rule on in cases like this. At the DEP level, in 310 CMR 10.23, which is a section on additional definitions, which means they're definitions outside of the standard definitions in the regulations. And they were added because there was concerns about how to define a term. And the term that they define in those regulations is adverse effect. And an adverse effect in those regulations is defined as a greater than negligible change in the resource area or one of its characteristics or factors that diminishes the value of the resource area. It goes on to define negligible as small enough to be disregarded. So that's the DEP definition. In your bylaw, section 172-7, and copies of these were provided. There's a section that says, if the commission, after a public hearing, determines that the activities which are subject of this chapter within 21 days of the close of the hearing shall deny the permit if it is determined that it's a significant effect on the wetland resources. So significant effect and adverse effect are fairly similar. Installation of one piling having a cross-sectional area of 0.78 square feet on a water sheet that is at least tens of thousands of square feet, in our opinion, is negligible and would not have an adverse effect. There are some benefits to the lift that I think you should consider. There are lift people and there are non-lift people. It depends on the type of boat or the boating that you do, but the benefits of the lift, the practical benefits are that you protect the bottom, and in fact, you don't have to bottom paint the bottom if you keep the boat lifted out of the water. And bottom paints, even though they're now advertised as environmentally friendly, I mean, they prevent the bugs from growing, so they can't be all that good. So if you can not have a bottom paint, it's a benefit, balanced against the disbenefits, which is the 0.78 square feet of pile penetration. In addition to that, the boat would be tied on this dock float without benefit of a lift, is closer to the substrate. It shadows out the substrate more than if it's hoisted out of the water. It actually has, because of the profile of the bottom, the very far bow section keel at some low tides, lower than mean low tides, could actually make contact with the substrate. Believe it or not, these are Commonwealth tide lands, so if the boat is hoisted in an upright position, it actually provides access for shell fishing under it, whereas if it's in the water, access is limited. So our argument for why you can approve this additional single pile is that there is no adverse effect, and certainly if you balance it against some of these benefits that I described, on balance, there's no impacts to wetland resources. Subsequent to writing this letter, the Shellfish Constable did respond with some new comments that weren't in the original comments, further opining that the pile would have an impact. It didn't say adverse impact, but said impact. But the further comments spoke to activities that could occur on a boat hoisting mechanism, which we disagree with. The follow-up email made reference to prop wash and concerns about power loading onto the boat lift. If you look at the information I provided, it's simply not possible with this type of mechanism to power power load, like you may power load a boat trailer as an analogy we could use. So and Mr. Whitney can speak to this, but basically the cradles are hanging by cables. They're suspended. They're not fixed, so they actually move. So in order to ride the boat onto the cradle has to be submersed in the water so that the boat can float on without making any contact, or if there was contact and friction, and you tried to power load, it would just pull on the cables and you wouldn't get anywhere with the loading. Mr. Whitney's here. He can probably speak better to it than I can. So There will be no power loading onto this type of equipment. In fact, if you did have a concern, you could certainly make it a condition of your approval. And speculating on a potential activity is really not what's before you. If that type of activity did occur, then it would be an enforcement matter. Ironically, the Shellfish Constable would probably be the enforcing authority, or the harbor master, or your staff. But that's not an activity that's proposed before you, and it's speculative to suggest that the applicant would do that, even if it were possible, which it isn't with this type of mechanism. So, I guess just in summary, we believe this is a relatively simple amendment request to add one additional timber piling, so they'll be reconfigured for the boat hoisting mechanism. The ramp, float, and pier are already approved and are not changing in any way. And we're here to take questions.
Simple question. Where does the project stand at this particular point in time? You're asking for an amendment. Is the plan, other than this particular addition you want to make, in place?
The Chapter 91 license was issued like 2 weeks ago, so it could be installed at any time.
Okay, so it's
now.
not in the ground
It's
yet?
not
You haven't
installed
had
yet.
to establish any of the other
It has all
pilings?
necessary permits, yes.
Okay, so it's good, so nothing has been done. Caitlin?
So just wanted to reiterate to the commission our regulation regarding the Shellfish Constable. In terms of significance, the following shall apply, whether mapped or not, areas where the substrate is deemed suitable as shellfish habitat as determined by the Mashpee Shellfish Warden or the Shellfish Commission, or as determined by analysis as per guidelines for Chapter 44, S53G. Said area shall be considered significant and subject to the jurisdiction of Chapter 172. Ashley is here tonight. She does have some comments prepared and would like to discuss them with the commission. I'm not sure if you will call her during comments or if it would be best to be heard now. so
Probably
you
the
can
better
deliberate
time to
over
hear
that.
it now. Let's do
Okay.
it now. Okay? What do you guys want to be a gentleman and let her in here?
Hello. Hi, yes, I just had some comments. We
Should
did.
just identify yourself.
I'm Ashley Fisher, Mashpee Shellfish Constable. Working with my predecessor, we've seen this project several times, and we did express the concern about additional piles. So the plan and in place has 2 on the float, and that's what was approved by our department, and we were comfortable with that. The addition of what I'm seeing, correct me if I'm wrong, we did go through the entire plan. I'm seeing an additional 3 pilings, not 1. The narrative does state that there's 1 additional piling, but from the plan in front of you, I'm seeing an additional 3. Those circles do signify a pile. So if you look at the float, right at the end of the float, you have 1 to the north, and then you have another 1 farther to the north. And then if you look down towards land, you see 1 at the end of the float, and then there's another 1 to the north. So in that configuration, I'm seeing 3 additional piles. That's just the plan that's in front of you. And I just want to reiterate the 310 CMR, section 1034.5. So with the exemption of 5, this is actually 34. 5 does state that you can take into consideration where there is only temporary impact. This would be a permanent impact. It's a fixed structure in place that's not able to be removed. So any project on land containing shellfish shall not adversely affect such land or marine fisheries by change is the productivity of such land caused by alterations of water circulation, alterations of relief elevation, compacting of sediment by vehicular traffic, alteration and distribution of sediment grain size, alteration of natural drainage, and changes in water quality, including but not limited to natural fluctuations in levels of salinity, dissolved oxygen, nutrients, temperature, turbidity, or the addition of pollutants. Negligible in my mind. This is the definition of negligible. It's so small or unimportant, it is not worth being noted. 1 square foot can produce almost 100 little necks. Doing our shellfish surveys of the area, we did find 10 per square foot in that area. Now, the bigger picture here is there's 10 animals there now, but those 10 animals spawned in the millions. So furthering the impact of placing more unneeded, unnecessary pilings, I do not recommend it. And I had many questions about the plan. As the narrative only states as 1 additional piling, the plan shows 3. In the bottom of the lift structure, the lift that was presented to the Conservation Commission shows 28 inches from the bottom of the beam to the water level at mean low tide. Per DEP, you're supposed to be 2.5 feet above the sediment at all times. With that boat lowering, will it contact bottom? There was no specs of a lift in this plan. This was only found out today that this was turned into the Conservation Department. And just the, operation of the boat lift, what vessel will be attached to the boat, to the lift, et cetera. We didn't really have that clarified. But I just don't see a need of additional pilings.
Anybody have any questions?
I do, I have several questions. What was the configuration on the first thing? How many pilings were there?
2.
Come on up. Where were they located? So,
The original plan had 2. And if you look on the plan, this is the new plan. If you look on this plan, the original plan had 2, one on the landward end, one on the seaward end.
on the float, attached to the float?
On the float, yeah.
So now there's, based on what Ashley said, there's 3 new
Well, I
pilings,
haven't
2.
finished, So, when we were in the review process, a Division of Marine Fisheries commented, and they wanted a mechanism to prevent the landward end of the float from bottoming out at low tides. So we introduced 1 additional piling, which was reviewed and approved. So there were 2, one on either side of the ramp, and one on the seaward end, the 6-foot end. So the ultimate plan that was approved and licensed had 3 pilings. Now, this plan has a mistake. The one piling next to the ramp, if you can see it,
Yeah.
where it says 40-foot ramp,
Yeah.
right where the ramp touches the float, that piling is not proposed. That got left over as a drafting mistake. That was one of the 2. There was one there and one on the other side of the ramp, and then there was one on the seaward end. So there was a total of 3 approved. So eliminate that one on the landward end of the float, and then take the one that was on the seaward end of the float and reconfigure, so we're going from 3 to 4, or increase of 1.
So the third one was on the south side of the ramp, on the seaward
Right.
side?
Just, I see it as being this one right
I don't
here.
have a pointer,
No, the
do you?
one, he just said that one by the ramp is coming out.
That's coming out.
Yeah.
That's coming out. So they're all around the boat lift. There's 4 around the boat lift.
There's
There's
3
no
now.
pointer, so I can show you.
Yeah.
This one goes away.
Yeah,
There was one here and here and here. That was approved. 1, 2, 3.
okay, all around the ramp, yeah.
Goes away, goes away.
So you moved those 2 over to there, and you're adding 2 more.
Yes.
Okay,
So the
now one
total-
more.
No, I'm adding, there's a net increase. 1, 2, 3.
3.
Those are all going away.
Okay, so yeah, you're just moving one out and you're adding a new one.
Yeah, taking that one and moving it over here.
Yeah,
And then the other, so there were 3 and now there's 4.
okay.
However,
One added one.
however, that doesn't seem to answer the problem of bottoming out now. 'Cause you're just
Yeah, that was
supporting
my
one
other
side of the
question, too.
float.
Well, the floats can also be retrofitted. The standard way to have a float from bottoming out is to create feet that are framed into the framing of the float, so like a 4x4 in each corner. That would
Hold it up.
prevent the float from touching
keeps it up.
Okay, but that wasn't, I mean, that
But where
wasn't
does-
permitted, that wasn't
Well, that's,
suggested or,
Where does the 4x4 sit? Does it sit in the bottom on the substrate?
when you get to a low tide, temporarily during the low tide, it'll touch, and then that's DMF's method of preventing.
So so you're gonna have 4x4s permanently in the substrate?
Only at low tide, and then they're not touching the bottom, so they're just resting.
Oh, they're attached to the bottom of the beam then?
Where is this gonna be? Those cross members that go under the keel are gonna hit bottom, without a doubt.
That was our concern.
Well, the way the cross member on that lift is designed is
We have the lift up here.
it will, the bottom of that beam that supports that cross member at low tide will not, make contact with the bottom on most tides, so the boat can go on to the.
Most times.
Yes, so that's why we have another side to the float. On an extreme low tide, the boat ties on the other side until the tide is appropriate to load it onto the lift. So he has the flexibility of both sides of the dock to use.
The other
Yeah.
question I have is, what's the length of the boat and what's the low tide level at the front of at the bow of the boat?
There's the soundings on the,
Right, but there's nothing in front of the boat cradle.
right, not exactly in front of it, correct,
Yeah.
yep.
Yeah.
The maximum, so,
Oh,
my name is Jim Whitney, I'm the owner. The maximum length of the boat that I'd put on there is most likely gonna be 34 feet, 35 feet.
Okay, so if you have 16 feet from the center, how much of the bow of the boat is facing landward and how much is facing towards Great River?
Probably half and half.
Half and
Whatever the
Okay, so we're gonna have,
leveling area. It would sit most likely right in the same area it would sit if it's tied up to the dock.
right, so I'm seeing at the ramp, is that 2.4 in parentheses? Is that the low tide, Mike? Is that,
That's reference to low tide, yes.
okay, and would the same on the north side of the ramp?
On the north side, it's a little deeper. If you look,
You gotta go up here.
right below where it says 6-inch OC, it's 5.1 feet deep.
Right, but I mean, opposite, where you have the 2.4 opposite that side of the ramp,
Yeah,
where the
but
bow
if you-
would be,
If you
right?
interpolate, it's a little deeper, and the other soundings support that, so it's probably
Okay.
about 3 feet deep on that side.
All right, because according to this cross-section of the left and bow, it looks like there's gonna be 3 feet from water to bottom of that beam in the water. So you're saying that at low tide, you get 5.1 there where it says 16 inches off center, but if 8 feet of the boat is come forward, I know part of the bow is out of the water, so if you just extrapolate and say 5 feet is past the piling, right, and then you,
Well, the water depth in that area, based on if you look at the surrounding soundings, we estimate it to be about 3.5 feet at low tide.
yeah, I see a negative 3.3 to the north in the same line as I have a negative 3.7 or 2.4 in parentheses and 2.0.
Yep.
Yeah, but then
So-
you also, you just go out a little bit deeper and it drops dramatically.
Right, but I'm talking about landward of that point. If you have 5 feet of the bow of the boat coming forward, and then you have the beam of, you got 36 inches of height dropping in there, so what is the depth of the water right where that beam is at?
At certain tides, it might not be deep enough, so in those cases, you tie on the other side of the float until such time as you have enough water. That's the benefit.
If I could speak to it, I, like Mike said originally, I have one of these lifts now at another property. And the one that the exact lift I have at the other property, it doesn't even have bunks that's set up like this. This one's got an additional 8-inch space between the top of the beam and the bottom of the bunk. The lift that I have now, the bunk's sitting right on the beam, so it's 8 inches lower than that. And when we have low tides, most of the time where the other boat is, I can't even get it on the dock, on the lift at low tide. I always do it at high tide. I take it off at high tide and I put it on at high tide. So it's never an issue of getting anywhere near the bottom. And it's always worked out real well.
Yeah, my only issue with the boat lift itself is you cannot, there's no way somebody's gonna be able to long pole in that. There's too much structural. It's, I mean, when you take a boat away, it's gone for the winter. You can't remove an entire boat lift. And some of our commercial shell fishermen go out there and they utilize that, you know, not commercial, recreational people. And just even looking at this picture, this Magnum picture here, there's no way. Forget it. There's an area that's gone.
That nobody would shellfish.
Nobody would shellfish in there. It's too much of a liability. And if there was a boat hoisted up under there, nobody's going to want to go underneath that. Or, I mean, in all honesty, I would not shellfish underneath of a lifted vessel.
I respect that, but in the other areas where we have the lift, the mechanics work under them all the time. People are under them diving all the time. The bottom of the boat is at least 5 to 6 feet off the bottom of the ocean.
And the access is with the tool, the rake, you don't have to get under the boat to do that.
And is there sufficient depth for exiting and entering the boat lift itself? That, I know that it's fairly deep, but it looks like it drops off kind of fairly significantly. You're going north, it goes 5.5 to 2, so just that would have to be,
We're not entering from the north.
okay.
We're only entering
From the west.
the west, and,
Okay.
as we stated, we're entering the same way you would tie the boat alongside the 24-foot base. And the only limitation that might occur on low tides, low tides, would be the potential for that landward cradle to not be able to lower sufficient the boat. In those cases, Mr. Whitney would tie his boat to the free side of the float until such time as the water was deep enough to be able to ride into the cradle.
And there's enough water there that when he ties off that it won't be bottomed out either, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
What does your boat draw, Mr. Whitney?
I don't know exactly.
So you don't have this
I'm
boat
thinking-
yet, right? Or-
Well, I have a boat now, but I would probably get a bigger one that, I don't know the exact amounts, but I'm thinking I'm gonna have something around 34 feet, which, center console boat, a couple feet, a foot and a half, couple feet.
And it may be the very nose of the front third and maybe the keel but certainly from the 2/3 from stern forward would always be, in fact, that's the beauty of the cradle, that those little tides, you can make any potential on the bow side of the boat.
Yes, I mean, it all makes pretty good sense to me. It looks like you're less likely to have your boat on the bottom, generally speaking. And particularly, it's not going to be washing around in wave action or something when you're not around. And however, at low tides. However, there's a couple things concern me about this plan as it exists. One is that you were permitted for a system which would keep the float from bottoming using stops on the piles. Now, you're not proposing and doing it in a different way, a way that's not generally, I haven't seen us permit. We normally require stops on the piles to prevent floats from bottoming. So that's one problem. That's not going to work the way this is set up now. And that means that there's presumably going to be at least one more. Now clearly, a drawing would have to be changed because it says 5. It says 5 and shows 5.
Typical of 5, that's.
Yeah.
Four, I'm sorry, that's a mistake.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, that can be fixed. But again, it looks to me like you're really going to need another pile if you're going to keep the float from bottoming in the way that was permitted. The other concern I have about it is that there's nothing here about preventing this system from bottoming. I don't see any proposal for a stop on that. I mean, I would like to see that stopped, and then we would not have to worry about issues with the boat bottoming. You would have to put it on at high tide. I mean, the suggestion that things like power loading can be dealt with as an enforcement matter really don't make any practical sense. the structure needs to be designed in a way that no harm will come to the substrate, period. We can't be out there to watch every time the boat comes in and out of the dock, obviously. So that's just something that is a practical matter that needs to be done.
It was a speculation that even if we attempted to, well, the problem is you can't power lift on a.
Right, I understand that.
Cable suspended, it's not fixed, it would move if you tried to.
Yes, but of course, it could be on the bottom. Nothing stopped it from being on the bottom.
Right.
So it should be prevented from bottoming, in my opinion. Neither objection of mine is fundamental. It couldn't be addressed, I don't think, but those are two concerns that I have.
So more information on, probably a schematic, if you will, of the boat lift itself, a cross-section of the actual design that'll be used on the plan with the depths associated with that. As the plan stands now, they do have the depths, of course, associated with the float, but,
Yeah. Can
Which I guess
this
would be
boat lift be
comparable,
configured till it has a stop to prevent it from bottoming?
I'm sure there's limit switches up and down on it to stop it. The other,
Permanent, stop.
One would think, or something should be.
yeah, because it
possible.
runs, the beam runs right in line with the piling, the motor hangs off the edge of the piling, so I'm sure there could be a bar right at the bottom of the piling that stops the beam right at that point.
Now, of course, the other issue here is the shellfish warden's concern that there will be
Piling is the
at least one more piling. And that definition is something we've struggled with before. I'm not really sure where we want to go with it this evening.
adverse impact, Dale, is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, significant adverse impact. It's a
Right.
good point that even if there were 2 or 3 pilings, it's not a large fraction of the total surface area of how big is this shellfish, prime shellfish ground?
It's really the entire Great River down to the end of that dock on the east side. This just happens to be a very productive area, and when you start talking about the addition of a pile without showing need for the addition of a pile, I disagree with entirely. There is manufacturers that make paint that is e-paint. It's environmentally friendly and it's been proven. It creates a hydrogen peroxide interface, so things just don't set. It does not kill them. They just will not set.
Is that ablative still, or is
Sorry?
that still an ablative paint?
I don't know. It's a manufacturer in Falmouth. So they make e-paint, and they have a product that we use actually on our shellfish gear. It's called Netminder. It's the same manufacturer. It does not hurt the shellfish whatsoever. We use it on the gear. We grow them. So as far as the need or painting your boat, I just don't see a need to put an additional piling in the area.
I believe I probably should have done this initially, but I just also, for the record, wanted to mention quickly Jeff's comments regarding this boat lift as well, the harbor master. Not to deflect from the current conversation, but the addition of a boat lift to the proposed project changes the direction of any vessel that would be mooring at this pier, where before a vessel would be able to approach a parallel to the pier face. Now the only approach for entering this lift is from the north. There is currently one mooring located approximately 100 feet to the north of this project. The addition of the boat lift does not affect navigation for users of the water, although by limiting the approach to the north, this could present issues for the owner of 21 Metacommon. If there's a northern wind, it would push the boat moored at mooring 434, which could decrease the distance between the moored boat and the mooring in the boat lift. And he's available for further discussion, of course. I just wanted to make that.
But now we've been told that this is going to be configured so you would enter from the west, right? It's parallel to the dock. That's apparently a misunderstanding on the part of it.
Perhaps.
Yeah, we couldn't
Perhaps.
follow that.
We're not changing anything about the
Right.
approach to the boat than what was already approved.
Yeah, it may have been a misinterpretation of the plan.
It
Can't
sounds
speak for
like it.
him, but that's just, for the record, Jeff's comments.
Trying to understand, Caitlin, this is an amendment to the open order of conditions. So what is the order of conditions now? How many timber piles are that's currently approved?
Well, the plan that I have on record for the original approved dock shows, it's not listed in the permit specifically, 16 pilings. I see 2 on the float, one on the water side, if you will, and one on the landward side. So I think Mike was saying that it was approved for 3 pilings on the floats. That may have been something we just,
So that it could be blocked from hitting the bottom.
14.
Wa-
Yeah, you got
was it a piling or was it
12,
a different structure added?
8, 10, 12,
14, and then you get into the ramp. So you got 14 called up
for the
on this
walkway.
modified plan for the walkway.
Mm-hmm.
Then you get to the ramp. And, well, the plan is a dynamic thing. It's changing as we talk. So one of those is not included, so we're at 14, we're at 15, 16, 17 is,
Right.
18.
somehow,
18.
we have an approved plan. I'm trying to understand what was approved, okay? So that we can figure out whether this is more pilings or same number of pilings or less pilings.
It's definitely at least one additional pile. The last revision date I have for this approved dock was 7/12/2018. And the last revision date I saw was remove 2 piles and revised ramp length to 40 feet, which did occur. But I still only see 2 pilings on that float. So if I understand what Mike said correctly, there was actually 3 piles approved for that float, and therefore the addition of 1 would only be,
Well, if you look on your plan of record that I reviewed during the Chapter 91 process, we got a comment from DMF. So there's a revision subsequent to that July 12, 2018, in response to the Division of Marine Fisheries.
okay.
And that was a revision reviewed and approved administratively, I believe, by Drew, because it was a recommendation of DMF. And that revision occurred on May 1st, 2019, and it's on the plan of record. And you should have that in your, where we added float stops, 1 in 1 piling. So the reason we added the piling was so that we had 2 pilings on the landward end to fasten cantilever beams to stop the float from bottoming out. So that was from the Division of Marine Fisheries, we did that. Subsequent, prior to that, we were working diligently with Rick York to try to do everything we could to minimize pilings. That's why there's a 40-foot long ramp here. That's unheard of. I mean, ramps are usually 16 to 18 feet long, so we eliminated several pilings in an effort to work with Mr. York because of the sensitivity of this area. So I can make that all clearer. We're also hearing some other questions about how to do the flow stop modifications, how to do the cradle stop, if you will, if we want to call it that. And we can verify with Drew that we made that May 1st revision. So it was, I'm looking at this, putting aside my mistake about that 1 piling, 3 pilings to 4 or 1 additional piling. That's my.
If I could point out, your cross-section still shows that piling with a float stop there, on the cross-section.
Yeah, I know.
All right, so once you move that piling, that float stop goes to another pile?
Stops no longer work, so that
So it's-
piling isn't part of the application.
Right, but I mean, the float stop, it does, you don't need a float stop
We have to
anymore?
come up with a different mechanism for the flow stops that we were going to, the traditional way is to extend 4x4 feet down from unfastened underneath the float. That was the method, that's the other method that's used. We were trying not to touch the bottom at all. That's why we had the little projections. So we may actually design a cantilever from the piling we might come up with a design to cantilever from the 2 pilings that are against the flow to create float stops. We have to look into that.
Okay.
Now that we hear that concern, it sounds like it's not a viable option to put 4x4s in the corner of the floats. So at low tide, they touch, and at high tide, as the tide rises, they don't.
Well, we don't know what the response of Division of Marine Fisheries would be, but they apparently didn't like something that simple before. So just guessing, I'm suspecting that's not going to fly with them. So
It sounds like you have a little more work to do.
Yeah.
A little research with them, as well as some design work.
I'm just looking for more info on the depth of water. We're at the bow of the boat, what the boat draws,
Yeah, that's a key point.
You
right?
have-
And how this lift matches up with the boat that draws, what the boats draw, I mean.
But if I could, just to finish the dialogue on that, if we don't have the boat lift, the boat's tied there anyway. So I'm not sure what your point is, with all due respect, Steve. How does that information help render a decision on the boat lift? We have a float that's approved, that'll have a boat tied next to it. We've already acknowledged that on some low tides, because we wanted to extend it out deeper, but we got pushback from Rick York on that. The keel of the boat may touch at low tides. That's factual information, there's nothing we can do about that.
It's about the lift touching. Based on the info, we don't know if the lift's touching. You said we might have to put stops on the lift.
No, we will be putting stops.
Right, but there's nothing underneath. Your first comment was 4x4s to go into the substrate.
That was for the float.
No, I was addressing the lift.
Yeah, so the lift will come up, there's another way to create a lift stop. And that's just bolting angle irons underneath the beam to the pilings. So it cannot go further down than a certain distance.
And we'll do the same thing with the float.
And again, just to reiterate the concern there with bottoming out and to make sure there's sufficient water depth and not bottoming out of any structure, including the boat, that the fact that it is such a highly productive shellfish habitat, that any change to the substrate there would be an adverse impact due to the use of it if hypothetically, it's not adequate.
We actually thought that pushing the dock out a little bit further originally was better. And for some reason, they had us bring it in closer.
The addition of the piles is the removal of the shellfish habitat in perpetuity, and I believe that was really the big catalyst for reduction in size.
And it's also a narrow waterway. I
And
mean,
it's-
you have to have a certain amount of navigation through the area. So that's
So
why it
it-
was pushed back too.
Right, and there was a compromise basically to have the 2 pilings, well, 3 potentially, in the area as opposed to 2 more to get it deeper. So not, just reiterating a known fact there.
Yeah, that's what Rick York worked on, is trying to
Mr. Chairman.
eliminate.
Yes.
Do you think it'd be appropriate to try to get a sense of the commission as to whether this constitutes a significant impact on the shellfish grounds? I mean, that seems to be the big issue
And
here.
that is primarily focused at the pilings.
Yes,
And the
addition-
lift itself, if it is going to bottom out at these extreme low tides. The extreme low tides usually occur in the wintertime. It would be possible, if the boat lift does pass, that the structure be removed in the winter if there's no boat on the dock, because it may bottom out. That could be a future condition, but until we find out what can be done for the stops during the summer and when he's actively using the boat.
So Dale, you're looking for an
Well,
opinion as to
I don't want
whether-
to send these guys on a wild goose chase if we're just going to come back and say you can't put even one more piling, right? I think that would be unfair to the applicant, I think.
Correct.
I think we can come up with solutions for cradle stops and float stops. We just need to work on it. And we can provide you with not just a manufacturer's representation, but an actual scaled cross-section showing you the relative distance from the bottom to the bottom of the beam on the cradle with the floats, with the cradle stops. But I was actually thinking we were only talking about a pile, and that was one additional pile, is what my application was for. I didn't expect that we were causing as much concern as we are for doing this. So, but I think we can come up with ways to mitigate the concerns.
But most of those are not necessarily, you're still going to need an additional piling in order to orchestrate whatever it is you do to keep the boat off the bottom.
Well, We're gonna need 4 pilings, we believe,
Okay.
from the 3 that, instead of the 3 that were approved.
Okay, so that's one additional.
And I'm going to make a wild guess that they may need one more to provide the kind of stop that they had before. But that's something that they're going to have to work out. So the real issue is, are we willing to allow an additional piling?
That's,
Whether it's 1 or 2, it's sort of the same question.
yeah, we also need to keep that boat up when it's there, off the bottom at low tide.
No,
So it's not doing other damage to the same
And
general.
I am surprised that you didn't design this to go seaward to the northeast rather than go in straddle shoreline coming in where the water is deeper.
It's very narrow.
Pardon me?
It's very narrow in that area. That may have factored
Well,
into why it
well, I
wasn't.
I can speak to that, Commissioner Dalton. In the original plan, the dock was exactly where you say it is, but we were crossing a wider section of salt marsh.
Oh, okay.
So because of Mr. York's comments, we rotated it
Yep.
counterclockwise, parallel to the property line. So we're crossing the most narrow section of the salt marsh. So there's these competing interests that we're sort of boxed into. Navigation being one, we can't extend longer because of that, which would give us deeper water. We can't go northeast for deeper water because we're crossing more salt marsh.
Oh, really? I
So-
can't see that in this way this is set up.
It's also a salt pond in that area in addition to the salt marsh, which is a separate resource area.
If you look at the history of the revisions, there's several iterations that we worked through to get to the point of getting the order of conditions.
The other question I just thought of, did the harbor master approve to place a 34-foot boat in that location?
With the boat lift, he just commented.
Length was never even,
Yeah, no,
He doesn't have any authorization about what we can tidal or float.
Okay, I didn't know for navigation or
moorings.
anything like that.
There's it would be for moorings.
For moorings
You have to
only,
be a
okay.
certain feet that they pay for every year with, within that
Okay.
amount,
Okay.
but.
No, and we,
no, it's surrounding moorings in the area. If they need
and
to
we
be
don't have
moved, it
any,
needs
we
to be
don't have
covered
any
by the
say on the
owner's expense.
length. I mean,
No,
we could,
just wondering if the harbor master said anything on it.
we could condition draft conceivably. I mean, that would be possible, I think.
It has been
but
done
not
in the
the length.
past. That conditions of boat size and drafts have been incorporated into orders of conditions. It has occurred in the past.
The Conservation Commission's concern would be that the boat touching the bottom.
Exactly. So,
Yeah.
So,
I guess we're talking about coming back with some modifications.
I understand what you're
stops,
concerned
yeah. We know.
with. I understand what
Yep.
you're looking for. We'll do our best to address them and we'll submit a revised plan.
all right,
I'd like to request a continuance to March 26th because I have 2 conflicts in the next 2 hearings. I can't be here. You have a hearing on the 13th, I think.
Yes, we do, and the 26th is the next date. I mean, wait a minute, sorry. It's a bit of a weird year where we only have 1 meeting a month for some of them. So actually, yeah, the next available meeting's March 12th.
And I'm not available for that, so. I'm
So
asking
it would be
26th.
March 26th, yep, exactly. And you'd be the first person to come if that's how the commission decides to proceed.
Okay. Do I hear a motion?
I
March-
move that we continue this hearing as requested.
Could I ask,
Mark.
what,
Of course.
Mr. McKay, originally you were asking a consensus about the adverse effect. Can we
Yeah.
still answer that question before we go forward?
I do not have a problem with one additional piling. I have a concern with the bottoming out of the boat. I think that's going to do a much larger area to the substrate.
Yeah, I agree with that comment.
And I also agree with that.
Okay.
I mean, we're very concerned, I hope you understand, that we have already had enormous degradation of the shellfish environment in Mashpee. Shellfish are very important to us for a number of reasons. In particular, I mean, it is water quality. It's an issue, it's a water quality issue. And the shellfish warden is struggling mightily to improve the situation in our saltwater habitats. I'm sure you appreciate it too. You want clear water. We all do. We all want a nice environment. And so we really get concerned at every little square inch of especially this very prime salt pond environment. This is about as good as it gets for salt fish and for shellfish and Mashpee, if my understanding is that, isn't that correct? It's pretty.
Yes, and I mean, when you are writing your order of conditions, I do only ask that maybe it be taken out in the winter, this boat lift structure. I don't know how easily that can be done, but.
No.
That would cause more damage
Yeah.
than what he's proposing.
Okay.
In and out every year, construction, you're talking, it would be a mess.
Well, you could condition that it be in the upright.
Position.
Position,
Correct.
okay.
that's fine.
Yeah, just-
It's, certainly the commission is very sensitive to your concerns. But I agree with Brad in that I think overall this is likely to reduce disturbance of the bottom. We all know that boat operations inevitably disturb the bottom. I look at outside my property at what the boats are doing to the bottom, and it's kind of outrageous, really. I mean, we have irresponsible boaters. But here we have a gentleman who's suggesting a means of keeping his boat clear of the water most of the time, and to me, that's probably a positive thing overall, as opposed to 0.7 or perhaps a 1.5 a square foot of surface.
Okay, do I
I
hear a
think that's the
do I hear a
consensus.
motion?
then.
Brad,
The motion is already
Dale
on the
made a
table.
motion.
so we
Okay,
can-
and
we
is
can
it
second it.
seconded?
I second the motion.
Okay, second. Can I hear from the commission, please? All those in favor?
All right,
Aye.
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 Okay, we continue.
Continuance?
Yeah,
So-
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Call the 6:15 hearing from National Grid as the applicant on Simon's Narrows Road for a proposed gas main extension with a right-of-way from the existing gas main within Quaker Run Road. Yes, please. You
Good
realize
evening.
You realize you're late. You were supposed to be here at 6:15.
That's all right.
Please begin.
All right. For the record, my name is Leanna D'Annunzio with Ty and Bond, speaking on behalf of National Grid. This RDA is for a proposed gas main installation, a portion of which is an exempt activity under the Wetlands Protection Act. The gas main would be installed within a recently improved section of Simon's Narrows Road and would provide a gas connection for potential future residences. The gas main would span from the existing gas main within Quaker Run Road, which is right here. It would go east for approximately 370 feet to the property line at 353 Simon's Narrows Road, which is right here. The gas main would consist of a 2-inch diameter plastic pipe. The installation would require the excavation of a 2-foot wide by 3-foot deep trench. All of the work would occur within the existing paved roadway, and upon completion of the work, the trench would be backfilled and the pavement would be restored in kind. Erosion controls would be installed down gradient of the work, so kind of in this area, as deemed necessary. And the resource areas that would be impacted by this project would include the 100-foot buffer zone to coastal bank and salt marsh, which is this kind of green line here. You can't really see it, so that's all buffer zone, as well as a small portion of land subject to coastal storm flowage and coastal bank, which is this kind of blue shaded area over here. So it just extends just a little bit into there. And all of the impacted area would be in previously disturbed area, which is the paved road. At this point, I'd like to open it up to questions and comments. Thank you.
So if I look at the map correctly, you're really doing all of this in order to bring service to 2 additional house lots?
I don't know. I was only contracted to by National Grid for the gas main, so I don't really know a whole lot about the plans for the area, unfortunately.
There are plans for 353 and for 3 and maybe even 1. I think
On that.
353 might be Simon's Narrows. I think 3 and 1 might be Mute Swan Circle, but because they have come forward with with some filings already for those properties. So that would be my educated guess that that'll serve those properties once they're developed.
Okay.
And I had as she had stated, this project is exempt due to CMR 10.02, number 2, with the understanding that best management practices will be used to maintain, repair, or replace, but not substantially change or enlarge utilities to provide electric, gas, water, telephone, telegraph, and other communication services. Just to read that for the record. And I just was curious, I think it's pretty obvious, but because it's a freshly paved road, that's going to all have to be excavated
It would be just a 2-foot wide
within the
trench.
middle of the newly paved road.
Yeah, so it would be within the newly paved road.
Okay.
As a BMP, they could use plastic construction mats for the excavator, so it doesn't cause any additional damage other than the 2-foot wide trenches.
Sure, yeah, it was just more of a curiosity question, and again, just that much more concern potentially of adverse impact to the resource areas. But as long as it's accounted for, and then I'm satisfied.
Okay. Any questions from the rest of the commission?
No.
Nope. Then I'll ask for a motion.
I move for a negative determination.
Or hear a second?
I second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you for your patience.
Okay, thank you so much. It was interesting.
Right, but I learned a lot.
Yeah, this is my first Conservation Commission hearing presenting, so it was pretty fun.
Well,
Hope it's not your
maybe,
last.
maybe a little less hiccupy than this usually, but
Well, thank
All
you
right,
so
great.
much. You all have a good evening.
you too. I just have to excuse myself really quick. I will be right back.
Okay. Culvert work at Tracy.
And then we can go over the pre-post.
Yes, yeah, there's some interesting
In
ones
the
here.
meantime,
What does your hat say?
actually.
South,
somebody-
Fenway South. Oh, what's that? The-
Fort Myers.
Fort Myers, oh, okay. I was wondering where the south came from.
Yeah, it's actually pretty good. It's fun.
It's a great ballpark.
Yeah, it is. Good place to go in the wintertime.
Yeah. You've been at home for a while.
I have been.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, I'm not going anywhere.
For a while there, it was like, wait a minute, which week is, oh, that means that, okay.
Yeah, and my next trip's in mid-April.
Oh, where are you going this
I'm
time?
going to the UK and Italy.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, my wife's teaching a one-week art workshop in Italy.
Nice.
So we're gonna go-
Whereabouts in Italy?
The Amalfi Coast.
Oh.
South of Naples.
Tough job.
Tough job.
I'm a Sherpa.
Can't-
South of Naples, what are we talking about?
He's going to the Amalfi Coast. That's wonderful. That's one of my favorite
Nice.
spots. Tuscany was okay too, but Amalfi was sensational. And then in the UK,
In UK, yeah, we have friends and relatives there, so we're gonna spend a week in the UK, go to Italy for a week.
Where are you
come
in
back
UK?
this week. Wales, Cardiff,
Oh,
Wales,
okay.
and then Bath.
I do.
Bath area.
yeah, that's where my wife's family is now, is Bristol, Bath.
Yeah.
And I used to go to Wales. We had a plant there many, many years ago.
Okay, so I just have a few pre-post items to go over. It's fine. In an unanticipated matter, just to bring up, because it was only scheduled very recently, currently, Mesa will be going on, there's a Community Preservation Committee meeting regarding the 2 applications that we submitted for Santuit Pond nitrogen and, well, phosphorus and remediation, excuse me. Well, with that being an ultimate goal, one of the applications is to do some wetland restoration on the southeast 13-acre bog, with the hopes, again, that the addition of wetland habitat will not only mitigate phosphorus from the pond via flooding, but it will also mitigate nitrogen going into the shoestring base watershed, sub-embankment watershed. The other application that was before the Community Preservation Committee was the purchase of the Chop Chalk bogs and the surrounding upland habitat. Again, with the hopes of remediation of phosphorus through wetland habitat restoration and/or flooding and/or other means, depending on how feasible all those options are. With that said, I'd actually like to go right into authorizing the flooding of that 13-acre bog. It did get brought up at the last meeting, but there was some question about Chad being on that committee, if he could vote on on this committee. So if, I would ask that you vote to authorize it tonight,
So did you vote it in?
formally.
Are we still in session?
Yes.
Chad Smith, Vice Chairman, Conservation Commission. I just came from the Community Preservation Committee, and both of the proposals were approved unanimously.
So I guess we should do so, huh?
So congratulations to Caitlin and Drew.
Oh, thank you. And Rick, I must say, Rick was very important in this. I mean, he was as big of a part of it as anybody, and he stepped in tonight to be able to actually present it, because it was just a bit of a poor timing in that, you know, I got to do this, and Rick was on vacation.
He did a
Busy
great
place
job and
tonight.
had quite a bit of support.
Excellent. And just to reiterate, what I was requesting a vote for was, sorry not to muddy the issues, but it's to the flooding of that 13-acre bog, which would occur more in the near future. We still are checking on the water withdrawal permit, if that's still valid from the previous bog owners. If that is the case, it's a lot less complex. But if that is the case, this is a kind of a contingency vote that you endorse the activity in general. It's being implemented or tried in some other towns. I don't know exact examples of that, but speaking with the Division of Ecological Restoration gentlemen, that it is something that people are trying now as a means to remove algae from the pond, and therefore the phosphorus source in the future once it dies and settles in that continual cycle.
So I wasn't here, I read the newspaper article about it, but is there
Yeah.
anything new info? So you're gonna just dump water out of the pond, flood the bog
Yes.
to pull the nitrogen out? So it drops
Phosphorus,
the,
yeah.
phosphorus, so it drops the water level on the pond?
It's
bit.
really to remove additional sources of phosphorus, just the phosphorus that continually settles on the bottom from these blooms continually blooming and dying and blooming and dying. Because 78% of the phosphorus is actually coming out of that substrate. That's been determined through studies, ACOM study, I believe. So to remove that, the additional sources of phosphorus for the primary source of it in the pond, that's the ultimate goal. So it's not so much that, oh, it's going to all of a sudden be clear, but it's a measure to do in the near future, as opposed to, you know, more involved efforts down the road that are currently being vetted out with the tribe and Army Corps and DEP and other studies that are ongoing.
So, okay, so I lost you a bit. So when the water comes out of the pond and floods that bog, that's to the south? The
Yeah, it's
bog is
removing
the south.
algae. It's just like.
Moving the algae
That's
out,
in
right.
that water,
You're moving
essentially.
the algae out of the water.
Yes, so
okay.
and then the phosphorus will be uptaken by the wetland plants. Nitrogen and phosphorus are the
Okay,
limiting
so that's the
nutrients
algae
for
at the
plant growth.
upper levels of the water,
Exactly, yes.
of the depth of the water.
And
right?
there's not much to lose, really, in the sense that it's been done before on accident. It was more of a vandalism situation, but of course, you know, water levels will be looked at, and there'll be before and after testing as well, when and if this goes forward, to see if there really was an impact or not. So it's a different than the two applications that went forward, but this would be in the case that we can go forward with this without a formal application, that water withdrawal permit's still valid, and that it's within our purview to do so in a more simplified manner.
So we need a motion authorizing the flooding of the 13-acre bog.
Yes, authorizing or endorsing, if you will, the concept, probably be a bit more accurate.
So do I hear a motion?
I make a motion that we authorize the flooding of the 13-acre bog at Santua Pond Preserve, per Caitlin's description. Is that?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Very good.
Okay.
All right, great, thank you. And again, thank you, Chad, for being part of the CPC for the requirements. Okay, so that's really great news. That makes my night. So just to move on to the next item. So Tracy Lane, we own property over there, the Conservation Commission. As you can see, based on this plan here, that green, that's a wetland layer that's added onto the map there, so it's essentially a freshwater wetland. At one time, culverts were dug. The exact nature of these culverts is still a little bit of a mystery, but there was probably for bog flooding and, but essentially, the Cape Cod Mosquito Control is constantly grappling with this area. It's a very small culvert. Apparently, it's very prone to clogging and hence less flow, more mosquito habitat. And they really want the town to step in and really assist with the maintenance of this area and making it more of a permanent solution. So, what I ask you tonight is to authorize a culvert work at that property to ease the management of that site for mosquitoes.
And this culvert work is at 59 Tracy Lane?
Yes, yep, and I have a picture just kind of showing, it's not a great picture, but on the top left, you can see the culvert itself that's leading to that freshwater wetland, and then on the bottom left, there's a small, you can kind of see that small screen that somebody keeps removing apparently, which is making the problem worse. We added a little sign saying, stop doing that. So hopefully that'll, I keep checking on it and it seems to be staying put, but that's another issue.
It looks like a mosquito
that's just.
control ditch. I mean, is that the mosquito control guys that are doing that?
I don't know if I don't believe the nature of the ditch was for that specifically. I think it was to connect the culvert to the area from Aquay Bay.
So what
But
are we
I'm speculating a little bit there. I don't know 100%.
What are we authorizing exactly?
So the work,
This is
the
something for the
DPW
going
would
to
be
do.
doing this
We're just
work at this
authorizing
culvert.
that.
Yes, since it's our land. It's technically on our property. It's a Conservation Commission owned land. Yep. And they're chomping at the bit. It's apparently an issue every year, and it's getting, if anything, I don't think it's getting any better. So time is of the essence
I
on
move that
this.
we authorize DPW to do the culvert work they believe necessary at 59 Tracy Lane.
Or a second?
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Oh, also, we will not be voting on any minutes this evening, just to,
That's why we skipped over them.
no minute voting. Okay, next item is this lovely sign, as you can see in the left picture, has seen better days. It looked like it probably got hit by a car, but it was already rotting out. There was some plywood. It was made out of a material that just wasn't meant to last. So hence, per all of our new signs, we are going to contract Mike Day, again of Day Signs, a local sign maker in Mashpee. He's done the Santua Pond Preserve sign, and he did the new Mashpee River Woodland sign. So it's made out of this sign is made out of a poly-carved plastic material, essentially. So it's able to last much longer
Sure does.
in the field. So I ask you tonight to authorize $995 from our lands and maintenance account, which was the cost of the other signs as well.
Was it from the same person?
It's the same person, and it's a solid
It's the
work.
best there is around.
Yeah, it's, and it's just right under, I mean, it's a reasonable cost in the sense that it's
I'm not really familiar with the cost of these signs.
They're-
It seems
they-
like a lot of money to me, and my second thought on it, was any of this work put out for bid to get a lower price?
No, because we have used him in the past to great success, and the DPW does the installation work, so that cost is off the table. That does significantly reduce the price, but based on our satisfaction with the existing products we do have from him, we would recommend going with him again. This sign should last for, much longer than any cheaper sign with a cheaper made material over time that you're replacing more often. I think in the long run, this is a better choice economically for the longevity aspect.
This stuff lasts for years.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen
Yeah.
a dozen years, and it looks the same.
Yeah, it's
after
good,
a
great
dozen years.
material. Yeah.
And
definitely.
it's really solid, it's solid work. If you want to check out the Santua Pond Preserve sign, the Mashpee River Woodland sign, you'll see just, how they look.
Yep, his signs are everywhere. Okay.
I make a motion that we authorize release of $995 from Lands and Maintenance account to purchase the new Mashpee River Woodlands Fitch property sign.
Or a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, very
Okay,
good, thank
got
you.
that?
Yeah, and he already, I mean, it's great, he already had this prepared, this proof, if you will, so he's ready to go. And just an update on the Willow Bend enforcement order. We sent the citations out as per voted on the last meeting to Willow Bend and the tree company. We received the money from Willow Bend. We have yet to receive the fine from the tree company. And there is a on-site
What
scheduled
was the
on
amount of that fine?
300, our max fine. And there is a meeting scheduled on February 5th, and I believe a contractor has already been hired to do the restoration work. So that'll be occurring in the near future.
And who pays for that restoration work?
It-
Willow
the-
Bend?
Yes, the applicant. I mean, well, what do I call him at this point? The violator.
Do we pick the contractor? Or is he?
I believe it was somebody who is a viable option that has been chosen before. I don't want to say it was Maffey, but I think it might be Maffey, so, but don't quote me on that. The meeting, again, will be occurring on February 5th. If anyone expresses interest in going to that meeting, I'm sure you're of course more than
Were the-
welcome to go, as long
Were
as
the
you're not quorum.
trees cut down, is that what it was? or-
Yeah, it was a significant amount of trees within the riverfront to Santuit Pond.
That was all,
I think it
trees
was
in
something
there,
in
so
the
they-
number of 18 trees that we know of,
Okay.
to expand the green, and
it
we had
was
no
shading the green.
notification.
Oh, sure, yeah,
Shading the
yeah,
green
down
screen.
between
Yeah,
the
the
green and the
red,
river,
yep.
right? Yep, okay, yeah, I know where that is.
And there was no real contention on their end. It was a pretty much, okay, we'll fix it
Yeah, it's a
Yes.
heavily vegetated
ASAP.
area, yeah,
not getting the sun that it needed.
yeah, okay.
And that river needs as much help as it can get. All
Okay.
right, and last order of business is I just have a couple things to update the commission on as the assistant agent. So the Santua Pond Preserve Land Management Committee, the first meeting for that will be scheduled on February 4th. I don't believe it's met for quite some time, years if ever. They've been working out some details and getting all the people set up for all the different jobs within that committee. So this is really good news. This is going forward. As you may know, it's owned by both towns of Barnstable and Mashpee, and it was purchased with the help of state funds. They own the conservation restriction on the property. So we do co-manage. We more or less manage our own areas, but of course, consensus is to be had, and hopefully that now that this committee will be met, we can go forward with some more permanent apertures, like signage, appurtenances, like signage and whatnot, which is, I think, sorely needed out there. It can be a little confusing. It's a lot of bogs, very similar looking bogs. As far as the Environmental Oversight Committee, just an FYI, that will go forward with the styrofoam and plastic straw ban for Maytown meeting, which failed in October. For the herring count program, I'm gearing up for the season. I've scheduled 3 talks at Southport, Mashpee Environmental Coalition, and the Senior Center. I posted it on Facebook on the Mashpee message, which seems to be a pretty good outlet to get the word out about anything. Need to schedule library and training sessions. And this year, counting at Santuit is of the utmost importance with the upcoming changes that NRCS has recommended. Also with the study going on with the tribe and NOAA as far as issues that may be related to river herring there. Those are 2 separate, but of course, related
gotta get
topics.
We'll be able to get the changes recommended for this coming season?
I think we're on, I don't want to speak, but if,
Too soon? Too quick?
yeah, but I think we may be on NRCS's timeline, the federal government timeline. So I'm not quite sure that when those fixes will be forthcoming. I believe there's still some deliberation as to the most viable option, realistic, and whatnot. Because this spring there's a potential for a video counter prototype to go in there. So for us to have the better count data, we'll be able to better gauge the effectiveness of these video counters and just to have better data in general. The protocols really sets up for 9 counts a day, which is very difficult to achieve through the months of April 1st to June 1st. But that statistical model is based on that. Every year I just hope and pray that I'll just get enough data to get analysis done, and every year it seems to be getting better and worse in certain ways, but hopefully, I really just need as much help as possible if anybody's willing and able to hike out there. It's a mile round trip. You can just stay out there.
Camp out,
You can get your own permission from the commission to camp out there.
DPW to put up a little hut.
Well, it'll be a warm April. That's what
You hope for.
yeah, warmer than it is now. Okay. So just in general, we're gonna use the kits again, and I'm just gonna try to maybe set up a sign-up sheet. I don't know. I might try that this year. I always kind of bring it up, but we'll see. For the land stewards, I just cleaned up some reported trash recently. Nothing crazy. Everything's pretty good out there. It was older stuff I was getting. Elder service volunteers will be making more pollinator boxes, hopefully. Some specialized land stewards. The Eagle Scouts finished installing 6 bat boxes at Johns Pond, Pickle Cove, and Santuit Pond. Those were built by an Eagle Scout a few years ago, so it was great to finally get those out. Another Eagle Scout will be planting a pollinator garden off Great Neck Road North, right next to the veterinary there. There's a few trees and a guardrail, and it's just a nice little grassy patch. So he's going to put a little garden in there too, which will be really nice to have. AmeriCorps so far this year has done trail maintenance in Mashpee River woodland properties, including rebuilding the steps at Fitch. So Fitch is getting a new sign. I'm fixing up the kiosk and new stairs. So it's good stuff.
Place to go, place to be.
Yeah, it's a really, really nice trail. If you haven't checked it out, I recommend it. It's a fairly short walk, too. AmeriCorps will be coming back in February for herring run maintenance per every year. And in the spring for more trail work and potential Verna Pool certification. Again, I started that last year. That was a lot of fun and rewarding, and we got one of them certified. So we're just waiting to get that official word from the state. And one of the projects I also want to get done is building walkways over the pools, which are essentially vernal pools at the trails leading to the Quashnet bogs. That will help hopefully minimize any foot traffic through there, since they are vernal pools. You see them every year. They have eggs. And they're basically turning into a wetland. They have duckweed or pondweed in them. I mean, they're basically tiny ponds now. And fixing trail steps at Santuit Pond Preserve on Great Trout Hill. I may ask other volunteers to help with certification this year as well. MACC conference is Saturday, February 29th in Worcester. Dale and I go, seems like often, but if anyone else is interested, I believe I sent out the information, and you're more than welcome to, of course, go ahead. Sign up for workshops and attend if you'd like. It's usually a pretty good conference. And as far as training opportunities and professional development for myself, I've been taking hunter education courses. I'll be taking a boater safety course in the spring. And Drew and I will hopefully be attending ATV training in Plymouth as soon as they get enough people to sign up for the course. The ATV department the police department has ATVs to help monitor the conservation area, so we would be more or less backup for them. But have, of course, our certifications under our belts. And that's all I have for you tonight.
They let you drive the machines?
Yes, and it would be just for purposes of monitoring the trails, not otherwise.
So there's
Not for speeding around.
No, I'm not going to do the things that we are
there's a
morally opposed to and legally opposed to.
There are a couple of minor issues with these signatures.
Mm-hmm.
The ones that were ahead of this
Yes.
included meta comments, so we signed that.
Oh,
So we need to do something about that, I guess.
Oh, I can just take that out. I'll take it out and we can, that's fine. It's not a big deal. Destroy it.
Right.
Burn it.
Also, after the flag, I see these two that we were supposed to continue. Then there's also a certificate of compliance. So is that supposed to be signed?
COC, there was no inspections done this meeting. If that's for 28 Sampson
28?
Mills, there's still
issues.
issues that need to be rectified for that to occur.
Good. That's it?
All right, great.
Is there any other business to come before the commission? Do I hear a motion?
I move we adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you.
Thank you, folks.
Thank you, everybody. Was there a lot of deliberation, Chad?
That's good news. Oh, absolutely.
And was it just a matter of the expense of it?
So, that account was fun, huh?
No, I did not.
You know, the thing that bothers me is that.
Yeah, probably, yeah. No, I didn't get one. All right, we'll catch up to you guys later.
Okay, take care.
I was trying to remember who he is, I mean, I recognize him, but.
He had the shelf was great.